Welcome to this week's Beyond Bitcoin Hangout. These hangouts are brought to you by the Beyond Bitcoin crew. We encourage everyone to freely share these recordings and to help spread the knowledge and benefits of our DPost 2.0 blockchain technology that we all call BitShares. While listening to this recording, please feel free to visit our website, beyondbitcoin.org, and be sure to stay tuned in for some additional information at the end of the recording. As always, we would like to say thank you, and we appreciate your support. So please continue to vote for our delegate or worker contract so we may continue providing these valuable services to our community members. So once again, welcome, and please enjoy this week's Hangout.
Welcome everyone to another Beyond Bitcoin Hangout. Today is Friday, September 11th, 2015. We are joined today, as we are every week, by Bytemaster from the BitShares DAC and from Cryptonomex. He is leading up the Cryptonomex team to continue bringing delegated proof of stake 2.0, aka graphene, to the world. And we're looking forward to seeing where that goes naturally. All of you are here today to join into the discussion and to listen to updates. So Bytemaster will start out with his updates, and then we will move on to community questions. You will hear me bring up my questions and concerns at any time that I feel like we can plug it in there if it's necessary. And with that said, Bytemaster, would you like to start with any of the updates?
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for showing up again. It's great to see so many people here every Mumble session. This is getting really exciting. This week, the major announcement is our commitment to a firm release date for BitShares 2.0. I have just posted the details in a blog post on BitShares.org. I'd like to go over that blog post in this session for all you here so you can ask any questions about it. So the past week has seen the community test the active test network, which has now been in operation for over 2 weeks. Community members have been broadcasting transactions, so many transactions that they're running out of the test BTS with which to pay fees at 20 BTS per transfer. And the volume of transfers that were being pumped through the network is burning a lot of test shares. So the results of those tests show that we were able to handle up to 20 transactions per second in the highest block I saw. Some of the testers might have managed to push it to higher rates when I wasn't looking, which to the keen observer, you'd say that that's very far from the 100K transaction per second that we advertised back in June. I'd like to just take an opportunity to remind everyone that there is a difference between the scalability of the system and the actual performance of the existing peer-to-peer network code. If we were to actually do a test with 100,000 transactions per second, it would require our testers to have hardware and internet connections capable of sustaining 30 megabytes per second. And that's just to receive a stream. That's not to do any echoing it back to other peers and sending it to multiple peers. That is well beyond the means of our testers. And if we were doing those transaction rates, that would be millions of dollars in fees being paid on a daily basis. So that's not anything we're going to see anytime soon. When I was referring to 100,000 transactions per second, I stated this at launch in the scalability and performance blog post. I was referring to the rate at which we can process transactions, replaying them from disk on a single machine. And my statement at the time was that the bottleneck is single-threaded performance of the CPU. And we continue to be able to replay the millions of transactions that were broadcast on the test network in just a couple seconds. So we're delivering on that measure, 100,000 transactions per second for replay, which means that as we upgrade the network protocol, as the witnesses generate more money from income, they can upgrade their servers, they can get dedicated machines on fiber optic connections, and we'd be able to scale to 100,000 transactions per second using the current code base. We've always planned that the witnesses would upgrade their hardware and their network connections to support that as transaction fees from the network justified it. And just doing the math on the speed of light and the costs, we know that the hardware exists, that it's relatively affordable, and that it's a fraction of what Internet 2 is currently able to handle. So we know it's possible to build systems that can perform at these rates. And we know it's possible for commodity hardware today. My little iMac is able to handle the actual CPU load, which is the bottleneck. So when it comes time to scale these things up, the servers are not going to be bound by CPU. It's solely a matter of disk, memory, and bandwidth, all of which are scaling and growing probably at a faster rate than people's demand for transactions will grow. So what that means is that right now the test network is able to support about 30 times or more the transaction volume that BitShares is currently seeing, and 3 times more than the theoretical max of what Bitcoin can do, and that's using the current peer-to-peer protocol. And so we're very confident that this is good enough to go ahead and upgrade BitShares users so they can start taking advantage of all the new features we have. And that will continue to improve the networking code over the course of the next year with many innovations on that front. Based on the results of the test network and the current status of the user interface, we are planning to upgrade BitShares to 2.0 on October 13th. At 9 a.m. is going to be the snapshot, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Our plan is to prepare the snapshot, generate the Genesis file, and publish the Genesis file with instructions to connect to a seed node by 4 p.m. Eastern Time, a total of about 7 hours of downtime. We'll try to do it faster, but that's the window we're allowing ourselves to execute the transition. So there will be about 7 hours of downtime on the network on October 13th, and then we'll be upgraded. So in order to do this upgrade, there's been several changes that we've had to do since the June 8th announcement. We've had to postpone the bond market. Those features are not there. I've covered that in prior Mumble sessions. We've added the confidential / stealth transfers. That works at the protocol level and in the command line wallet. It will not be available in the user interface. We have also added a desktop client. You'll be able to download a full or light node that uses a Qt Chromium-based web wrapper. So it's basically a dedicated web browser for your wallet. Similar to how BitShares 1's wallet works, only you'll be using Chromium rather than WebKit in the latest version of Qt, which hopefully means that there will be a lot less bugs and a lot less crashing involved in the wallet. Most of the crashes we've seen with BitShares 1 have been bugs with the Qt wallet, and therefore we have been unable to fix those bugs because it's not in our code and it's in the weeds. We're going to be preparing a desktop build for the test network probably next week so that more users can participate in the build. In the meantime, our plans are to have a hosted web wallet available on the test network by the end of today, or at the very least Monday, to allow people to try out the new user interface. We have reduced the scope of the initial GUI web wallet so that we could release this on schedule. It supports more or less all the features that the current BitShares wallet supports: voting, transfers, market operations, and short selling. And those are the things that we have focused on supporting. New features such as recurring payments with withdrawal permissions and proposed transactions and account permissions, being able to edit them, are not available. So we've gone for the minimal viable product that can serve as an upgrade to BitShares 1.0 in the user interface. And then we'll be adding the additional user interface features as quickly as we can get to them. We didn't want to delay the release until everything was perfect on the user interface. Our goal, as we stated earlier, is just to be much better than the current BitShares wallet and experience. So that's where we are with that. The other thing is the block interval for the final network will probably be 3 seconds. unless something changes in the next month. So we're going to target 3-second block interval until the networking code can be updated with lower latency communication between the nodes. The witnesses and the delegates or committee members will be able to vote to reduce the block interval to 1 second as soon as the dev network or test network is up and running reliably with 1 second blocks. So I believe that covers the majority of what's changed since June, the schedule for the upgrade, and there's a blog post on BitShares.org that identifies this. I'm very happy that we were able to get here 11 days early. The end of summer isn't technically until September 22nd, so we're trying to do better at hitting our dates. So thank you.
Well, it's happening a lot quicker that we're moving down in our times from 5 to 3 seconds. I wasn't expecting it this week, that's for certain. So that's a big update right there in and of itself, right?
It is. That's what I'm going to target. We might still have to back off to 5 seconds, but I feel pretty good about the 3-second interval once we've got all the fixes in. Dan and Eric have been working on the P2P code to make it more reliable. They have a branch checked in right now that dramatically improves syncing, and that should be ready to integrate by the time we launch. So if everything they've been working on pans out, then 3 seconds should be no problem.
My question really is, Cato, it's kind of a question and a plug, because as all of you guys know, I love watching the community doing these awesome things and just taking it into their hands to organize this type of stuff. So when I saw Cato was organizing something kind of to establish benchmarks, like hardcore testing the network, I was pretty pumped. But then, of course, I don't know if there's anything that might be a roadblock or something that's in the way for them to do that well. And I'm kind of interested if there's any input that you might have for those who want to participate in something like that.
Yes, I've been watching his effort, and I commented on the thread. What he's doing is very much needed, and I greatly appreciate it. The one thing I did say was that it's important that we test two things independently. One is, how many transactions can we push through the network, given a single node with all the witnesses on that node? And the other is, how fast can the P2P network process transactions and stay synchronized? Those are two different measures and two independent systems. One is basically assuming perfect coordination and synchronization between the witnesses, and you're just testing raw throughput of, here's a transaction, can I process it and get it included in a block? And I encouraged him to focus the test and the performance throughput on the single witness model, because the other code is certainly not ready to be a reliable measure of theoretical performance. So the separation of those two concerns, one the network and the other is the processing of transactions, they're redesigning the test around that perspective. So one of the things I've been debating is, what's the value of a solid user experience relative to the value of decentralization and the FUD of being accused of being centralized? Because we could certainly offer 1 second blocks if all the witnesses were on one node, and we could do that today, and it'd be perfectly reliable and users would have amazing experience. But then, of course, it would be centralized, and if that one node went down, the network would be temporarily unavailable until the witness came up. So those are the trade-offs we have to look at, is between all those things. But I think we're opting for the stay decentralized and go with 3 second blocks rather than the best user experience and 1 second blocks.
Well, that makes sense, especially considering what the end goal is and that you're moving toward that regardless. As far as this this testnet, I guess it's like an advanced testnet or a little bit more specific testnet. Does anybody need to get these BTS testnet BTS from you guys for this?
Yeah, if you're planning on generating any kind of substantial volume of transactions, you're going to need a lot of BTS. So when we create a custom Genesis block for this testnet, if whoever is running the test should allocate to themselves enough to fund all the users. And I think they're actually going to set the transaction fee to 0. So you can flood away without any fees.
So that's not going to even be something that we need to be worried about then.
If you set the fees to 0, it's going to shortcut some of the logic. You're going to be adjusting values by 0 or whatnot. So I'd probably set the fee to 1 BTS or a fraction of a BTS, just so that you don't get some false measures of performance with things. And I'd also make sure that you have a mix of full accounts and regular users, so that you fully exercise all the logic associated with paying the referral fees and commissions.
Are there any pre-written scripts to generate transactions? I know Puppy's posted up one, and I think Cube did as well. And Xerox, I've used his that do just a simple send transaction. Is there one that generates a good mix? Just if it's already there, there's no point in reinventing the wheel.
First off, can I ask a question? Is there a reason for having multiple scripts?
Well, like the price range, right?
Yeah, the more variations you have in scripts, the more thoroughly you test the different code paths. And if you want to discover a slow code path, you want to try something that is a little bit more complex. Transfers are really easy to do because you can guarantee more or less that they'll work. It'd be nice if someone could create a script that would do market orders and would do a simulation of placing, canceling, and or matching orders. That's probably one of the more computationally intensive operations, but it's also extremely difficult to test, particularly performance tests. We have unit tests to verify that it all works as expected, but generating performance tests with lots of flooding of those types of things is really tricky.
So you see a reason for us to potentially have these types of test nets running maybe like every couple weeks or every month for a while?
I think as many test nets and as much testing as possible, the better. It's particularly useful for us if in the testing it can be done in a reproducible kind of way and a verifiable kind of way. So as nice as it is to have 100 people each broadcasting 1,000 transactions per second trying to flood a test network, it'd be more useful if someone would create a script that would set up a test network, pump a bunch of transactions through it, time it, and then verify that all the transactions did go through. That would be something that we could just run periodically to make sure that there are no regressions and is actually more valuable to us. But those types of tests are extremely complex to set up and script and verify, and that's why we're kind of doing it manual, brute force way. But having something that's reproducible is critical if we're going to find bugs and or focus on optimizing the test to increase performance.
Do you feel like this might be a place where something like brownies could be used to kind of pay a small group of people who want to accomplish this in this exact manner?
Already have plans to reward all of the testers that have been helping with the test network. I haven't paid you the brownies yet, but you'll get them, and you'll get them before anything share dropped on them. So yes, I want to really thank those who've been testing, who have been reporting bugs and helping track down the bugs on GitHub. Thank you very much for everything you've been doing. I think we've fixed a lot of things you've posted, and it's been very helpful. So someone asked the question, what's the timeline for adding the rest of the 2.0 features to the user interface? Assuming there are no bugs in the user interface that take priority, we can more or less add a user interface feature at the rate of about 1 per week going forward. So to create the page for managing the account permissions, that's about a week's worth of work. To create the page for doing the withdrawal permissions is about a week's worth of work. there's a lot of these things that, a week here, a week there, and pretty soon it adds up to months. But that's the rate at which those types of features can be developed, assuming that we aren't doing bug fixes for the priority features.
Tuck the Man's asking a question regarding the wallet, the new wallet. He says, I was working on something. If I missed it, sorry. But earlier, this question was asked by other name. Is it correct that the UI wallet will support everything the 0.9 UI wallet supports?
Yes, it supports transfers. It supports placing and canceling orders. It supports voting. It actually has a much better block explorer built into it. It actually supports creating assets already, and we're actively working on some of the asset management stuff. So it'll actually support more than the BTS 1.0 wallet supports. It does not support features like sending to address that BitShares 1 supports. And it does not support stealth addresses, which BitShares 1 supports. But as far as normal operation of sending money to a name, that all should work. You'll be able to experience the UI yourself next week, or possibly later today. And if there is something that you feel the user interface is missing that is a must-have, let us know. We certainly don't want to have anyone take a step backwards as a result of this upgrade. So if it's going to result in a step backwards from BitShares 1, that is a priority issue for us.
Have we come to some sort of consensus over whether or not the witnesses and delegates and workers, well, I mean, specifically, I guess, witnesses in this case, are going to be initialized as, stand-ins or proxies so that we can have a fresh round of voting to sort of reset the who's going to be what witness? And a second part to this question, would you mind going into detail or at least explaining a little bit the process of, I know that we don't have a set 101 witnesses, so how exactly does that voting work, and how do we choose how many witnesses are necessary to secure the network?
Very good questions. Our initial strategy for launching BitShares was that the existing witnesses would just get migrated in. The challenge we have is that there is no way of knowing who's voting for whom, because everyone's currently using stealth addresses and balances, and it's a vote per balance instead of vote for account. So the way in which we tally votes in the BitShares 2 is completely different, which means that there will be a fresh round of voting. Initially, all the witnesses will be controlled by a single node, and we're going to vote in new ones. It'll be just like the initial BitShares launch, where there were 101 init delegates, except we'll probably only have 10 init delegates. And those who wish to become a witness can campaign and request votes, and then they'll get voted in over the next several days. Everyone who is a worker will have to re-campaign as well. We wanted to make the upgrade as smooth as possible, but just the difference in how we're tallying votes means that it's not really practical to migrate votes in BitShares 1 to votes in BitShares 2. So we'll have to start the voting process over, which is good and bad. It's some house cleaning for those who want to get rid of delegates, 100% delegates that have a bunch of lazy stakeholders who aren't voting them out. And it's a fresh opportunity for anyone who wants to get more involved and was having a hard time getting voted in because of lack of attention. So those who are active will have a fresh opportunity to take the reins.
Is this something that we think might be valuable to accomplish maybe every couple years? I mean, when you really think about it in terms of the voting apathy, do you think that might be a potential solution?
There's an issue with on GitHub for having votes automatically expire after, or gradually expire over time if you don't reaffirm your position. So that's not currently implemented. We didn't want to delay release to implement that feature, but I'm fairly certain that the stakeholders will want to vote for having inactive votes default to the opinion of the active votes. If you want to stay active in the governance of BitShares, you need to keep your votes up to date. It's just like it is in any corporation where the shareholders need to vote. If you don't actively vote, then it's basically a no vote. It's I guess it's not a negative vote, but it's a, why can't I think right now?
Because it's early.
You're abstaining. That's the word I'm looking for. You're basically abstaining from voting, and that's the default. So because we have continuous voting, your decision to abstain fades in, but it does need to be a case where all votes need to be active, because information changes, and it's not safe to say that because you voted for someone at point A, that after 6 months you'd still choose, if you were to think about it, to vote for them. And of course, there's the cases of lost keys and things like that. We don't want the governance structure compromised by stuck keys. So that's a feature that I would like to roll out in a future hard fork with the approval of the stakeholders.
So we could potentially have the wallet just have a pop-up reminder, hey, vote. You haven't voted recently.
Correct, yes. If your votes haven't, on your page we can indicate the status of your vote. We have lots of reminders that we're trying to build into the system, such as, hey, you haven't backed up recently, and things like that. So that would go in there with that general concept.
Does that answer your question, Crypto?
Yeah, the first part. So the second part, specifically about how we witness, how we determine how many witnesses are required.
I didn't want to forget that. I can't answer the question of how many is enough to be decentralized. In my opinion, I think 10 is enough to be decentralized until those 10 come under attack, in which case we'd increase it. Yeah, but generally speaking, it's just the balance between cost and benefit of decentralization. So that's an opinion that everyone here is going to differ on. Some people are going to want 1,000. Some people are going to want 1. The network has a minimum of 10, just hard-coded in there. But other than that, it's up to each individual to decide. Now, once you've decided how many you want, you need to actually vote for as many as you want. If people are lazy and only vote for 5 witnesses, then there's only going to be 10 at most. If they only vote for 20, then there's only going to be 20, even if they want 100. In fact, you can't vote for there to be 100 witnesses and only specify 20. You can vote for there to be 100 witnesses, but you can specify 100 witnesses, but only vote for there to be 20. But the other way around, you can't do. So if there is not user engagement in actively voting for witnesses, then there won't be more witnesses. And that's actually a security enhancement. It is better to have fewer witnesses that are actively chosen than to have a long tail of witnesses that are there simply because users are lazy and not voting. That long tail of non-actively selected witnesses means that you can get 51% of those a lot easier than it would be to get 51% of the actively voted witnesses. And you can see that in BitShares right now. Most users probably vote for 20 people, 30 people, and then you got this long tail, where people aren't really paying attention to the other 70 or so people. So it's kind of just random who's in there. If an attacker wants to get in there, it's much easier to get 51% of the active witnesses. So fewer witnesses means that you have more security per witness, as in there's more review and accountability and more consensus on a smaller set than there would be consensus on a larger set. And the stronger the consensus is on the smaller set, or whatever set you have, the harder it is to attack that consensus. So the network's going to start out with 10, and it will elect as many as people are willing to actively vote for.
So just to clarify then, there'll be 2 separate items to vote on. You'll vote on a number of witnesses that you would like to see, and then you're going to have to vote on X number of individual witnesses to fulfill that requirement.
Well, the voting is definitely going to be a huge thing. And you said that during an attack, the community could vote for more delegates to kind of help to spread out the attack surface as like dynamically. At least that's how I'm seeing it. Is that a good explanation?
Correct.
The whole voting in these situations, like you said, like a situation of an attack, is this one of those things that you foresee problems because we have problems without the whole, I mean, we have this voter apathy thing that we're trying to deal with. Is there going to be anything that you see that we need to be paying attention to if we do ever get attacked? Like a committee or something that we should form, or will the delegates do this? Like, how is this going to roll out?
Well, I think Mumble is probably the best approach for resolving issues if there is an attack. Although I don't really see there being an attack on the network. If there was going to be an attack on these peer-to-peer networks, you'd see it probably first on Bitcoin or Ripple, long before you'd see it on BitShares. And we'd have plenty of opportunity to increase our decentralization as a result of observing attacks on the larger networks. The mining pools, the large mining operations, those people are processing much larger volumes. There's much more incentive to attack them. And if those don't come under attack, then there's no reason for us to have unnecessary decentralization and cost. As the goal at the end of the day is to make sure that the network is censorship resistant and robust against individual failing. So as long as we can achieve those two goals and have an irreversible public ledger, then we're sufficiently decentralized in my book.
Bytemaster, with regard to decentralization, there was a thread where you were talking about some new additions to the protocol and how that was going to help the peer-to-peer connectivity or latency particularly. Did you see Wacko's post about his proposal, which is actually our proposal for providing decentralization and denial of service attack robustness? Have you seen that information on his website?
You're talking about the fully connected backbone nodes and how all the witnesses connect to those and guarantee 3 hops between any 2 witnesses?
Yes.
Yes, I saw that. I think that's a great initiative. It will benefit dramatically from the new P2P protocol we have. Just a quick overview on what's different about the new protocol is instead of advertising that we have a transaction and then having the other nodes request it from us and then sending it to them, when we get a transaction, we just forward it on to all the other nodes, whether or not they ask for it. It uses a little bit extra bandwidth in some cases, but if you look at the back and forth traffic, it's actually less bandwidth. And it significantly reduces the latency because from the time I learn to the transaction to the time you hear about it, well, I notify you of the transaction and you have it simultaneously, whereas today you've got to wait an additional 250 millisecond round trip time to fetch the transaction from me before that. So just having the broadcast mechanism of receive and then relay out will be huge in reducing latency.
Was this the code that was implemented in JavaScript, and is that temporary in terms of implementation, or are we talking 2 different things here?
The code that was written in JavaScript was a client-server model. Well, it's sort of like that model, but except instead of being peer-to-peer, it's a tree where all the leaf nodes broadcast up to the root node. The root node creates an ordered sequence of the items it receives and then broadcasts it back down through the tree in a defined order. And that's also no back and forth. It's just a streaming mechanism. It's kind of like a phone tree. You tell the root node and then it broadcasts out over the tree to everyone who's connected. That was a precursor, as I was experimenting with JavaScript, to a fully peer-to-peer alternative to that. The JavaScript code was meant to show a decoupling between the networking code and the core blockchain validation code, and actually move it out of process. What that means is that anyone who knows JavaScript and can handle reading a file that's less than 250 lines long can participate in tweaking and improving the communication protocol between the various peers. It means that we can simultaneously support multiple different networking protocols, and it's just a matter for each node and the witnesses to decide how they want to communicate, which is separate from what they are communicating with respect to the blockchain. So we really wanted to encourage development and innovation there. And the current networking code is so complex that not even I can easily figure out what's going on there. I have to keep going back to Dan and Eric, who originally wrote it, to enhance it. So the goal is to move toward a more maintainable, readable networking base, as well as a simpler, easier to understand protocol. The downside to the JavaScript code as it exists today is that it does everything in JSON, which is a lot bigger and slower, and it's also not encrypted. So there are certainly trade-offs there. My goal was to use the JavaScript synchronization model as an alternative fallback for having all the witnesses use that to make sure they stay in sync with a guaranteed order without going on forks. But obviously it's slightly more centralized, and it'd be ideal to use the P2P code for the performance. The peer-to-peer code does synchronize faster than the JavaScript download model, just because there's less data going over the wire, and it's just straight binary copies rather than conversion to and from JSON.
I can't speak to the details of the connection scheme that Watco is implementing. I understand the high level of it, which I think you do too. But one of the things that he and I were talking about yesterday was the need to have the ability to make the actual witness nodes get connected to via the backbone nodes, so that you really access the backbone nodes first, and that insulates the witness nodes from direct access, and that will also provide the best, fastest connection because of the 3-node hop kind of theory, I guess. So in order to achieve that, he can't do that under the 1.0 scheme, which we're not so worried about now. But if the same restriction is characteristic in the graphene code base, which he hasn't had a chance to check into yet, then we will need some help with regard to being able to connect to nodes. And the other thing is that the witness nodes must, or anytime you need to connect to a witness node, it needs to go through these new backbone nodes, and so it will take some coordination to make sure we can get that implemented properly.
I'd be more than happy to work with anyone who wants to help build network code. So I'd like to switch topics here to answer some of the other questions that have come up.
Speaking of that, do you mind? There's one that before that Data asked regarding the delegates whenever the 2.0 comes out and how that's going to change. And then there's another one from Clayoff, but the basic gist of what he was asking, Data was asking, is it going to be required to manually go in and re-vote for these current delegates?
Yes, all votes are going to be reset. You're going to have to re-vote.
Okay, and will the 100% need to be re-voted in with a worker, or how's that going to work?
Sorry, can you repeat yourself?
Are the delegates, or aka the witnesses, are they going to need to be voted in with a worker?
Yes, you'll need to have a new worker proposal if you're 100%. witness. Fortunately, the cost of registering a worker is a lot less than what you had in BitShares 1.
Regarding along with the division of powers, the separation of powers, you're separating the fees as well.
Correct.
And because regarding the voting, so before you said there are only going to be so many witnesses as people vote for. So my conclusion from that is either there has to be a threshold, or there has to be two types of votes. So for one, how many delegates you want, and what delegates you want. So what of the two, threshold or two types of vote, is correct? If none is correct, what's then the case?
There are two types of voting. You specify the number you would like, and then you separately specify the witnesses who you would like to be there. And you can vote for more than you would like, but you cannot vote for less than you would like.
Okay, I will re-listen to that on my recording. And another question, is there any downside apart from everything Java related to the new peer-to-peer code you are writing or have conceptualized?
Aside from being JavaScript, no, I don't think there is much downside to the new code versus what we have.
Okay, thanks.
Clayop is asking, 2.0 Genesis accounts refer to committee account? That is, only a new account can refer an existing account?
Yes, you can upgrade your account. Yeah, all the existing accounts are referred by the committee account. There are no referrals tracked for the current users. In order to get referrals, you have to upgrade your account, and since obviously no one has upgraded their account yet, no one qualifies for the referral of anyone who exists right now. So all the referral income is at the discretionary spending of the committee members with oversight from the users.
And will account names created before the 2.0 launch be transferable?
Account names are transferable if they're registered through the faucet. If they're not registered through the faucet, then they will have a prefix.
And that prefix will do what?
If you registered the name Fuzzy outside of the faucet, then you'll become BTS-Fuzzy afterward.
Was there a date associated with that? I thought there was all registration after. Didn't this happen like a month or two ago when some caveat was formed? Or is that across the board? Like all names that have been registered so far are going to have a prefix unless they went through a faucet?
There is a date, so only names, any name registered before the flooding of the accounts. So we had a name squatter buying up all the accounts while they were cheap before the new prices could take effect. And so that's why we instituted this policy. So there was a certain date in which that happened. After that date, if you had to use the faucet if you didn't want a prefix.
Next question is from Fav, and he says, can we test the referral system prior to launch? Can you please post some info on link building? Marketers need some time to prepare and need to know how to build links for the launch.
If you were successfully using the referral program and getting stats in BitShares 1, it's the exact same in BitShares 2. That's if you're going to be an affiliate. As an affiliate, all you're doing is you're referring someone to the web wallet. The web wallet then will register and share the revenue with you. In order to participate, the account that you are referring must be a lifetime member. Sorry, the account that you're using as your referral account needs to be a lifetime or an annual subscriber. So otherwise you can't participate in the referral program. We are working on additional APIs that allow you to pre-fund the user account registration fees, and then you can actually have us sign up someone for you and give you 100% of the referral income. The way this would work is we have some people have like to build a funnel to direct users and to sign them up without leaving the page. And so they can iframe the wallet into the page, and if the user signs up like that, then they'll get 100% of the referral income from that approach. So we're working on those APIs. They'll hopefully be documented in time. Obviously, we'd like to have all of this done for you guys, but we're going as fast as we possibly can here. So it might not be at the level that you would like for advanced planning purposes. So whoever can figure it out, kudos to you. If you can host your own wallet and create your own referral program, then that's even better. But we'll do our best to get documentation out there for you.
Can you explain how worker proposal is voted in? Because as I see it, there's no threshold, and there's also no vote on how many worker proposals should be voted in total.
Yes, the current GUI does not support voting for worker proposals. So it only supports witnesses and committee members at this point in time. We'll try to get the worker proposals in there in the user interface in the next 30 days. But if you wanted to vote for one of those, you'd have to use the CLI wallet right now, which is not convenient. So yeah, we're working on making sure that you can both create a worker account and vote for a worker account in the user interface. But the current test interface does not support those.
But how does the voting for workers or worker proposals work? Because either you need a threshold regarding the number of workers, or a threshold regarding, the amount of votes that are necessary for any worker to be voted in, or you need to have a separate vote on the number of workers that are supposed to be voted in.
The number of workers is not defined by how many people are voting for, but by the amount of money available to pay them. Workers are, each day there is a fixed budget to be paid to workers, and when the worker with the highest vote gets paid first, and so on and so forth until the money runs out. If you want to vote for no money getting paid, you can vote. There are special workers you can vote for that will send the proceed anything that's left back to the reserve pool and or burning the difference. So you just vote for enough people to fully specify a budget of 100% of spending, and that either allocates it to users or to saving for later or to burning, and then you've fully specified how you would like to see the votes allocated and the money spent.
Right, so if there's a worker proposal and it has 80% of all the votes, it gets 80% of all the funds.
No, it gets paid first, and it gets paid the amount that it says it needs. So if I have a worker proposal for 1,000 BitShares a month, I'd get paid first, and the amount I get paid would be 1,000 BitShares, regardless of how much vote I have.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks.
There's a little bit of talk on the Ethereum forums, or well, not the forums, the Reddit. And there was somebody who made a point that I'd like to bring to you and see what your opinion or your thoughts are on it. And I'll just go ahead and read it right now. Matthias G. The article makes points that are misleading at best, fraud if one is to be cynical. And this is regarding the measuring performance on BitShares blog. And he says here, according to this follow-up article, all they have accomplished is to replay 100,000 transactions per second. No signature verification, no hashing, no nothing. Honestly, it is baffling to me how BTS is worth anything at all, with this sort of BS being spewed directly from their communication channels. Developing a single thread system without replication and calling it a blockchain is bending the meaning of the word to a point where it no longer has any relation to the real world. BitShares are basically claiming that they would be able to fly if gravity did not exist. So your thoughts on this?
Anyone coming from a proof of work mindset thinks that hashing is necessary and signature verification is necessary. But if you have checkpoints, signature verification is massively parallel. So I stipulated that all signature verification would be done on a cluster of nodes that validate the signatures prior to passing them on to the core node, which has to actually process the transactions. So there's no need for the main thread to be doing all of the signature verification, and I stated that in my blog post, which means that your throughput is all the networking code and hashing that's necessary can be done outside the main thread. At the end of the day, it's how fast can you update your database and apply the changes that is the ultimate bottleneck. So in a real-time system where you've got 101 witnesses all out there processing transactions as fast as they come, say you could only do one signature verification per second. All right, you have 100,000 computers surrounding your witness, that each of them is doing a subset of the signature verifications that come in. After they've done it, they pass the transaction onto the witness, who then has to process a queue of 100,000 transactions per second, apply the state changes, and validate each of the transactions. So yes, we can do all of the scalability, and his statement, that quote you made, is very short-sighted, or I guess it has a very narrow perspective on what a blockchain is, where its value comes from, and what makes it secure. And I'd say that's the primary difference between BitShares and a lot of the other systems out there, is that they conflate too many issues that are actually independent and separate. And if with Bitcoin you're conflating proof of work with security, with deciding who gets to produce the next block, with deciding the what the public record is, and with trying to make it irreversible. All those things are being tied into proof of work, when in reality making a blockchain irreversible, making it censorship resistant, these are all independent qualities that have very little to do with each other. And when you rely on proof of work to provide all of them, you're missing the point. And the proof of work mindset is basically saying that we're censorship resistant because anyone can produce a block. But in reality, what it's saying is whoever is willing to spend the most money gets to decide which transactions to include and the order in which they're included. We're irreversible only to the extent that someone's not willing to pay enough to reverse it. Because if you're willing to pay enough, you can reverse anything. So those two characteristics of Bitcoin slow down the Bitcoin network, and they don't actually provide the key thing for consensus. The number one thing for consensus is irreversibility of a public record, combined with a set of rules for interpreting that record. That does not mean you don't need hashes and other factors in order to achieve all of those things. You don't need the complexities that Ethereum is jumping through to incorporate all state into a Merkle tree of some kind. That's adding a whole lot of computation that's not providing you the value. It gives the people that believe in mathematical purity a sense of security, but it's a false sense of security because it's not coming from the source that it truly is. When it comes to censorship resistant, the technology is not what makes Bitcoin censorship resistant. It's the fact that shutting down Bitcoin with a brute force approach would be politically non-viable. If they could smear Bitcoin enough and the public turned against them, they could easily censor all of Bitcoin just by blocking a couple of ports, because every IP and port out there on the Bitcoin, BitShares, or any blockchain is easily discoverable because you connect to the network and it tells you everything you need to know about which ports to block. And once those ports are blocked, it doesn't matter if the communication's encrypted, it just won't go through because you just shut down the routing on those ports and they will have blocked it. Not to mention the options of just buying the right to censor it with mining power. So censorship is about political will and not about technology. Now, that's a separate factor from being robust and replicated. The BitShares protocol in Graphene is easily replicated. It's designed to be replicated. You can stream 100,000 transactions per second to a node and it can keep up, provided you've got 30 megabits a second of bandwidth. That's the ideal kind of easy replication. It's a lot easier to replicate BitShares than it is a lot of databases out there because it's event-driven rather than data-driven. So understanding the nature of blockchain, the nature of consensus, the nature of censorship resistance, the purpose of decentralization at a nuanced level versus a zealot kind of blind faith level is the difference between the BitShares community and a lot of these other loudmouths, other places. And eventually people will come to understand where things are actually coming from, where the value is in different things, and focus on building systems that optimize those characteristics rather than optimizing some mathematical, theoretical benefits.
Thank you for providing an answer and some input on that. I've been reading this stuff and really I want to come out and say things, but I just kind of decided to step back and let the conversation unfold as it does. But I did find myself reading a couple times and thinking, man, I'd love to hear what Bytemaster has to say about this.
I'd like to answer a question that was just texted. Hadrian asks, talking about the pros and cons of an architecture where all witnesses go through one node. Is it feasible or beneficial to have many nodes, but to only use one at a time? That's exactly what Bitcoin and all peer-to-peer networks are. It's just a timeshare. And I think it can actually be some kind of mathematical theorem that it's impossible to have a parallel blockchain with a deterministic outcome. You need to have a single point in time and space for sequencing of events. Information cannot arrive simultaneously at two different points in time, two different places at the same time, which means the order of events generated from around the world needs to go through a central point in order to be sequenced in a deterministic manner for consensus to be reached. All blockchains and peer-to-peer protocols are doing is rotating who gets to be that central point, who gets to be the reference point of for sequencing of events. And
doing so in a way where nobody can tell which one's going to be the next one, right?
Yeah, not knowing who's going to be the next one helps somewhat, but even if you know who they are, that doesn't necessarily mean you can stop them from doing their job. So, we're building all these protections, and if the point is to get from point A to point B, you don't need to drive a tank everywhere you're going. You're just going to tear up the road. Drive the vehicle that gets you from point A to point B with enough security to make sure you don't fly out the window. There's different levels of security, and there's overkill when it comes to security. A lot of people are fighting a phantom. I'd say the analogy is this. You build a 100-foot high wall all around your blockchain, and then someone just digs under. It doesn't, if you keep piling on more work for proof of work, or you keep relying on this technology or that technology, you're not focusing on the security bottleneck, or where's the weakest link, and making that stronger. And to a large extent, investing more money and time and resources and technology to build a higher wall when you haven't, taken care of the front door that's not locked, is pointless effort. And that's what a lot of these blockchain technologies are doing, is they're making complex protocols with robust security, mathematical guaranteed proofs of things that are basically assuming the worst possible case of can't trust anyone. And those zero trust models are so paranoid that they start to lose function and they start to pay a price for it. And I think that there is much, much better approaches to blockchain technology that make different trade-offs, so you can get better user experience, better speed, better throughput, without getting lost in the weeds of, is it mathematically pure? Have you removed the human element of it? The reality is, all consensus is humans voluntarily agreeing to honor a set of code and do business with each other. You can never remove the human element of it. A blockchain without humans, all economic decisions are human decisions, human valuation. So trying to create a currency that is mathematically pure is almost an oxymoron. It has no value unless people place value on it, and they choose to use that system for resolving their trades with one another. So if I can do anything, I hope to open the eyes of people to the bigger picture, because when you're so narrowly focused on the mathematically provable, computationally, theoretically decentralized approaches, you're missing the much, much bigger picture of what is possible with blockchain technologies and how it's going to impact far more of the world than most people are thinking right now. Even most people in the BitShares community are thinking right now.
You're saying that we have to disrupt the disruptors. The disruptors can't just get stuck in one line of thinking, and we have to continue trying to reach forward into the future and do what you guys have been doing from the very beginning, continuing innovating in the space.
I'll use Identibit as an example. Most people would say a private or walled garden blockchain where only some people can see the blockchain is completely pointless and completely, it's like saying, well, I can fly if there wasn't gravity. But even Vitalik, in a recent blog, has identified that a private blockchain behind closed doors still has tremendous value, particularly if you combine it with proof of reserves. It adds features that are not possible in public blockchains. You can actually have privacy from your friends and family. And it's like the current Swiss banks the old Swiss banks, where no one else knows your finances except for one or two people who you trust and who you're not doing business with, and you really don't care if they know. It's that type of value and use case that are not possible if you take the mathematically pure, completely public approach as the one and true way of doing this. Each of these things has different trade-offs and different value. And I think Identibit identifies a huge niche if you're willing to let go of some things that people hold sacred about blockchains and focus on what value there exists in the individual parts, let alone how all the parts come together to form a decentralized blockchain.
Maybe we can end it for this week. Is that okay? Or do you have anything else that you'd like to finish off?
That's all I have. Thank you everyone for showing up. It looks like it's another record attendance. So I don't know how you're getting all these people here, Fuzzy, but keep it up. Thank you everyone for coming. I'll see you next week.
Sounds good. Looking forward to more epic quests, Bytemaster.